Wednesday, everybody. My name is Aaron Conant. I'm the co-founder and managing director at BWG Connect. We're a networking and knowledge sharing group of thousands of brands who do exactly that. We network and knowledge share together to stay on top of the newest trends, strategies, pain points, whatever it is that's shaping the digital landscape. I connect with 30 plus brands a week to stay on top of those trends. Also do a lot of advisory work and strategy sessions as well. Do a lot of work with partner selection. So if you need help in anything in the digital space, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll put time on the calendar and always look forward to a great conversation. That's actually how we get the topics for our events, is when the same topics come up over and over again as pain points. We host events like this. We've also launched a lot of in-person events as well, small format dinners. So not the big 300-person events we used to do, but small format dinners. So anybody wants to have any information on those, if you're in a tier 1 city, shoot us a note and we'll make sure we'll get you on the list. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started today. We're starting at 3 to 4 minutes after the hour. Just so you know, we're going to wrap up with 3 to 4 minutes to go, give you plenty of time to get on to your next meeting without being late. And the other side is we want this to be as educational and informational as possible. So at any point in time, you have a question, drop it in the chat section, drop it in the Q&A portion there of the GoToWebinar panel, or just email me, Aaron, AARON at bwgconnect.com. And we'll be able to get those questions answered. That includes, an hour after the call tomorrow, next week. Don't hesitate across the board to shoot us a question. We'll get you an answer. The network's big enough. We have enough brands. We can ping enough people. We can usually get you an answer in under 24 hours. So you need any help, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Starting into the call topic today, this has just blown up over the past 18 months. It's a routine topic. I think that brands are bringing up on an ongoing basis. Is everybody and their brother jumped out and started selling online during the pandemic, and brand protection and growth, enablement, and online marketplaces. And so we got some great friends, great partners, supporters to the network, and a lot of brands in it over at Retail Bloom. We just asked if they would want to come on the line today, kind of give us an overview. They're helping a lot of brands out in this area. And they are also just, great friends and supporters as a whole. And so, we can throw as many questions as we want at them, but also, Nicole, I'll kind of kick it over to you. If you want to do a brief intro on yourself and Retail Bloom, that'd be awesome. Andy can do a brief intro as well, and then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Yep, perfect. Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. As Aaron mentioned, I'm Nicole Reich, co-founder at Retail Bloom, joined today by Andy Buss from our brand protection team. And just a quick background on Retail Bloom. So I know this isn't our first webinar, so maybe a little bit of repeat, but I wanted to get into our core models and then why this is so important to us on the brand protection side. So as you can see on this slide, our two biggest models when it comes to marketplaces. So first one, managed services, working with Vendor Central, Retail Link through Walmart, Seller Central, Seller Center. The brand has some type of portal that they're either B2C or B2B, and we're helping them manage that portal. So when we do that, obviously topics for today, brand protection, but we're following that up with content, customer service, expansion. So a lot of times starting on Amazon, going to Walmart, doing marketing, advertising, and then doing a ton of reporting, analytics, insights right now, specifically around competitor sales estimates and market share data. That's been really helpful. So that's one side of our business. On the flip side, in blue, we also have our wholesale model. So, being a preferred seller, being a third-party seller, or assisting a brand with a hybrid strategy where they have both Vendor Central and then Seller Central through us, which I know we've talked about in the last couple of months. We wanted to dig into one of the biggest things that comes up on almost every single call that we have with the brands we work on, specifically around brand protection, and why the things on the right are so important to either of these models. So from your perspective as a brand, you may sell to Amazon or you may sell to a third-party seller, but it is getting much harder, as Aaron mentioned, over the last 18 months, that if you don't have the right brand protection foundation, you can't be successful on either of the strategies on the left, whether it's through us or on your own or through another party. So we want to dig into the brand protection services. This is so important to us that we have, like I said, Andy from our product team that only does this for brands. And it really, speaks to assessing, like creating a brand assessment, implementing that strategy, and then enforcing it. So we'll get into that piece of the business model today. As for an agenda, we have 4 goals. So the first one is how to lay a proper foundation. This one with this community, I mean, Aaron and I have talked about this, I would say, for the last 2 years. I would say that it's probably some review for a lot of people on the call, but there's some big things that are coming out that Andy will speak to of why it's more important today than it ever has been. So some good tweaks on the foundation that might be helpful for you. The second and the third one are huge and what we talk on a lot of the time. So let's say you're in the brand shoes and you have that foundation, but you're having a hard time understanding the impact of it, either negatively or positively. When you do that foundation, what can you expect? What happens to buy box? How do you quantify, the impact of the loss in sales when buy box goes from 100% to 80%? So we'll give you some tools and exercises that you can do on your own to help quantify the opportunity or the impact of that. So you can use that for internal conversations. Third, we'll talk about the other impacts of brand protection. So, there's a dollar amount, but then there's all of the other things on Amazon and Walmart that get a lot harder when you don't have that foundation in place. So we'll spend some times of here's the challenge and here's the solution into that. And then we'll close out with a client case study. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andy to speak on the foundation portion first.
Yeah, and just really quick, I'm going to jump in. You had some more people join. If you have any questions along the way, drop them into the chat, drop them into the Q&A, or email them directly to me, Aaron, AARON at BWGconnect.com. If we miss anything along the way, you can jump out to our website and just go to the events page, and we'll post recordings and follow-ups there as well. So anyways, yeah, Andy, I'll kick it over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Also, I'm happy to be here today. It's fun to talk and present on this topic rather than just being in the weeds and servicing, brands on this day to day. So hopefully I can shed some insights on this and field some nice questions and help you guys out on this front. So first of all, we want to set up, how do we, why and how do we set up that crucial foundation, the foundation that's legally enforceable to kind of launch our enforcement efforts, keep things clean, right? So before we create or explain that foundation, just wanted to kind of look at the context and provide a few stats that I'm sure won't surprise you on many fronts here, but kind of the context of why we even need these efforts. So right now, about 33% of shoppers are going to go into a store. I'm sure you've done it. I know I do it all the time. And they grab their phone and they look at a price on maybe a jacket or whatever it might be, right? Home Depot. I think I do this a lot in Home Depot, unfortunately, but and then try and find a price cheaper, right, on Amazon or on Lowe's, right, if you're in Home Depot, whatever it might be. And so 33.6% of shoppers do that while they're shopping now. Also, about 60%, 58% of people say they'll stop doing business with a company online if they have a poor customer experience. And so that gets really to what Nicole will be talking about in the second portion later. We want to clean up the brand presence, clean up the sellers, so that the content and everything you're presenting to the customers is proper and you're able to service them appropriately, right, online, even if they order online. Also, about half of online shoppers, 48% now, head straight to the large e-commerce marketplaces like Amazon, Walmart, right? They're not necessarily going to yourstore.com, right, to buy your product. They might say, I need a warm hat for winter, right? And they go to Amazon directly, and you're competing now against all of those brands to have them buy your product right away.
Yeah, and I want to interrupt. Sorry, yeah. I want to interrupt here. I just had read a report from Jungle Scout that they had released on some recent data to show that 75% of all consumers said that they started along other channels with their search on Amazon. And I believe it was like 60% on Google. And then you can imagine that the sites, other popular sites would be a little bit lower than that. But that was definitely new news. We knew that it was always going in a positive, like in an upwards direction. But I think the last time I saw a stat like that, it was more 50% of shoppers started on Amazon, and now it's around 75%. So just wanted to give you guys a call out there. I'm not sure if you guys saw that report, and if not, if you have questions on it, I can send it to you. But Amazon is not going anywhere, right? And Walmart's still closely right behind it.
Yeah, I mean, this number's only going to go up, that's for sure. And then lastly, just kind of a really big picture stat to kind of, I guess, set the floor for our discussion here. But over the last 17, 18 years, the World Intellectual Property Organization has seen their intellectual property disputes go up almost 400%. So you can see that number. It was 1,100 in 2003, over 4,200 now last year. And what we're saying with that stat is just, hey, your intellectual property is important. It could get challenged. It's happening all the time. And what we mean by intellectual property, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, right? The copyrights, the trademarks is kind of essential, what we'll be focused on here today. But domain names, right? And are those protectable? Are they not? Are they violating someone's trademark? All of those go into those numbers. So we really want to make sure we're protecting it properly. And then what problems are we trying to solve, right? I want to make sure, I guess, that we're not just talking about a foundation, that we aren't all on the same page about what we're addressing with that foundation and why it's there. So, and I know we had some feedback from the attendees that even kind of set this up for us today. A lot of you were saying there's unauthorized sellers, right, that are affecting your listings. You can see on the screenshot to the right, the many different sellers on this one boot, right? And so it's $59.50 in the buy box, but you can see it ranges up to $69.95 on just the several sellers I was able to capture on the screenshot. And so we're trying to clean up those unauthorized sellers. That's kind of the first problem. Secondly, we want to keep the buy box, right, for either you or your authorized sellers, as opposed to your gray market and unknown sellers. We want to make sure we're owning that and not having it also suppressed, right, whether it's owning it from making sure no one else gets it, or just making sure it's not suppressed due to lower prices elsewhere. And then price matching, that goes hand in hand with the buy box issue, right? So if the buy box is being fought for, there's obviously price matching and price fighting going on. Now other sites are starting to match the price. Algorithms between Google and Amazon are going to lower your prices on those products, and there's lost margin there for you and your retailers. And we'll make sure your retailers, have a great relationship with you and keep buying from you.
Yeah, and this one on the price matching or suppressed buy box. So we got some feedback before the call on some of the questions that go out to you guys and asking and providing feedback before we hop on here. There was a comment about having another online retailer. In this example, it was Ulta, who's running a sale, for example. And what they're finding is that Amazon's looking at Ulta's pricing, right? And we talk about this a lot. Usually when a UPC, when you can plug the UPC into Google Shopping and you get all the different sites, that's a really good indication whether or not Amazon's going to be able to use that data to match their site. So in the example of this last bullet, for example, Ulta runs a 30% off sale right now. Amazon sees that. They either drop their price to match that automatically and maybe issue some chargebacks to the brand, or they say, hey, I can't compete with this from a profitability perspective. I'm just going to take your product out of search or out of buy box. And what that is called is suppressed buy box. And it's Amazon's way of saying either get the price as low as possible, or you're going to lose sales because we're going to decide to serve a competitor. So how do you address that, right? That's part of the solution that we're trying to solve in today's session and giving you guys that information. So that is just as an example of what we would call suppressed buy box.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about this earlier, Nicole. Walmart actually goes kind of one step further with that, and instead of just saying, "Hey, click here to view lower other prices," on Walmart, if you're not competing right on price, they'll actually say your listing isn't serving, right? There's other prices that are too low to be competitive, and your listing isn't active right now. So another really important reason to get this all in line. Finally, the last problem we want to address is misrepresentation of the brand, and again, Nicole will touch on that in a bit, but we're talking about the content, the bullets, the titles, all of that, the marketing and presentation of your brand that gets affected when other sellers are pushing information onto listings. So why do we need a proper foundation? Why can't we just reach out to people kind of willy-nilly, right, and tell them to stop selling or shoot them an email? And the reason really goes back to the first sale doctrine, often talked about. Some you may have heard of this before, but basically, it goes back almost 100 years to a Supreme Court ruling, so it's well settled. Many rulings on this, obviously, since then, and it says, hey, seller, right, retailer, or even just individual, if you come into possession of a trademark product, a Nike shoe, a Bose headphone set, you're allowed to sell that again, right? You're not violating their trademark by selling that product a second time. And so that obviously presents a huge problem for brands, right? Meaning anyone can sell your product. They're not violating your trademark by doing it. And so we need to figure out a way to overcome that, right? To kind of knock that down. And so the way we do it is through a reseller program. And the reseller program is essential. It typically has 3 or 4 parts to it, which I'll touch on in a second. But the core, I guess, the core teeth, let's say the teeth to the reseller program that really allow us to enforce are the material differences. And what we mean by material differences are product characteristics that we incorporate into your reseller agreement, and then also quality controls, right? How we suggest or kind of require our retailers to service customers, ship the product, handle returns, handle defective product, all those issues go into quality controls. And then product characteristics, think of warranties or your packaging. There's a lot of different product characteristics that we can also incorporate into your reseller agreement to set the stage for your proper enforcement.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in here really quick because this comes up quite a bit, and because of the first sale doctrine, just for brands on the line, unless you have something in place like a reseller program that legally addresses this, they are 100% allowed to sell your product. And if you're going to go out and file a trademark infringement or a counterfeit infringement because Amazon will take them down, like that is it's a very dangerous game to play right now, because they've gotten very savvy, and if their whole storefront gets shut down and they don't have counterfeit product and they're not infringing on your trademark because they've legally acquired it and are reselling it, the ramifications are your brand will then be sued for lost profits for their entire store. And I've just heard some very a lot of intense things going on in that space. They've realized they have another trigger to pull, and the way around it is a reseller program that's set up correctly on the back end. But just a heads up, don't just go off willy-nilly filing trademark or patent infringements. It's not a good way, or counterfeit. It's
right. Yeah, and I'm sure many of you have seen some sort of pushback from sellers at this point, either an attorney letter they had drafted sending, saying, hey, I'm allowed to sell and you're harassing me, or this is business interference. And at a minimum, right, we want to avoid those letters. But like Aaron was saying, they could escalate that as far as complaint, lawsuit, go to arbitration, whatever it might be. But you want to avoid these obstacles, obviously, and do it right. So, and
another quick question that comes in is around, this on both are you seeing this on an international basis, and are you helping brands with this on an international basis as well, or is it?
No, that's a good question. And I mean, it is obviously becoming more and more of an issue for brands internationally also, right? That's the global marketplace now. So we've advised, I wouldn't say we've done this same program or anything for brands in Europe or Asia, but we've advised, we know the setup in Europe, right? It's called selective distribution. There are ways to set up your program similar to this reseller program I'll describe here. But there are ways in Europe to basically set up your selective distribution model so that you have control over who's selling on your marketplaces and who are your resellers authorized over there. And it's very similar in that you want to have those material differences ready to go. So if let's say you start with this program here with, we work together, we set up your reseller program for the US, it's all good to go. There's a lot of that you can take and pretty much put into your European model. And I know, Canada has a very similar structure now as well to our enforcement. Obviously, the key difference is there's no price enforcement you can do in Europe. So we always want to make sure brands are aware of that, not trying to enforce a MAP price or anything there. But it is something that we can assist with, and it's similar in a lot of regards now. Yeah.
So biggest difference summary there, because like you said, Andy, we get that question a lot, right? So you can do reseller or similar reseller programs in Europe, for example, but the whole MAP piece, which is obviously super beneficial in the US, isn't applicable in Europe. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah. Yep. There's the protections basically for the reseller program. Just don't touch pricing.
Yeah.
And so within the reseller program, wanted to kind of highlight what I guess a typical reseller program would include. The reseller agreement is kind of the first document we always work on with the brand. We want to set that umbrella structure up for the whole program. Secondly, there'd be an online selling application or agreement that we would create that kind of references back to the reseller agreement and says, hey, like we said in that agreement, you're only allowed to sell online given A, B, C, right? Whatever we want to put in there for your brand. Thirdly, a distributor agreement if it's applicable to how your sales channels and how you're selling if you use distributors. Nothing too complicated when we do distributor agreements typically, but we want to make sure the distributor themselves, right, aren't some of those sellers hopping on Amazon and selling your product because of the margin they have. So we want to make sure there's some minimal controls there. And then that MAP policy that's often discussed, kind of abused and misused often, but we often we'll also help brands create a proper MAP policy and work that into the reseller program also. And then, so when we talk about the reseller agreement, and obviously it is so key, right, to the overall program, just wanted to kind of touch on several provisions that you would normally see within one of those agreements, so you have an idea of what we're talking about here. Typically, there's introductory language, kind of boring, right? But this is who we are. These are our brands. This is why we're creating this program, and this is kind of what you as a seller are accepting, you know, right, by executing this. Secondly, there'd be those product characteristics that we talked about. So this is what separates our authentic product, right? The label, the instructions, anything that goes with your product from those unauthorized sales. There'd be quality control. So those two together, right? Again, those material differences we referenced a bit ago. And then a restriction on online sales, because this is kind of the whole point, right, of our program is we want to restrict the online sales and then reference the online selling application that's needed to do that online. Some marketing guidelines. Often brands have a resource, right? Maybe a Dropbox, something like that, a portal that they allow resellers to access their proper images, their you know, trademark usage, that type of thing. So we want to make sure that your marketing guidelines or your IP usage guidelines are available to the resellers.
And we'll talk about why that's important as it relates to other impacts of unauthorized sellers on marketplace content in a couple of slides too. But that's coming up a ton right now.
Yeah, and then finally, the ability for your brand to change or even if necessary, terminate the agreement with the resellers, right? So we don't want you to be stuck in one place. This needs to be kind of a living, breathing document, right? And able for you to update it as we go. So
a good example of this one, I was talking to one of our brands this morning and we had helped them with this process, I would say 4 years ago. So it was I wouldn't say it was brand new, but it was a little bit it was a little bit more difficult, especially as it relates to distributors, because at the time of us getting this program going, distributors were not on board with having to enforce a policy that the brand was telling them to do. You know, it's still a little difficult today, but it was definitely way more difficult 4 years ago. And this ability to amend and terminate, I bring that up because when we initially put this policy, we helped them, you know, put this policy together. There was some language in there that said, hey, you can be on Amazon, but you can only do fulfillment by merchant, for example. You can't be Prime or you can't do fulfillment by Amazon. So those are some things of when you have the ability to amend it, that language that might work 2 years ago doesn't work today, and the language that you have today might not work a year or 2 years from now. So especially as it relates to the logistics and the fulfillment the challenges that we're seeing going into Q4, it was important for them to be able to say, hey, you know, before, you know, we could have, you know, only 3 authorized FBA sellers and as many fulfillment by merchant sellers as we want. But now considering how those are impacting buy box and potentially all the liquidation that's happening, you know, last year, we need to change that. And now we're going to say that there's a limit to the number of FBA sellers, whether you're authorized or not authorized, and there's a limit to the fulfillment by merchant. So just as an example, when you're able to amend this, it's good to revisit this, you know, every 12 to 18 months or so, because you want to make sure that you're keeping up with the changes in marketplaces or the changes of how this policy may impact logistics or fulfillment or other pieces of your business.
Yeah, that's so a really good point.
Yeah, just a question that comes in. Why does it need to be a reseller agreement? Why not a reseller policy?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I get similar questions along the lines of why do we need to have one if we have an online selling agreement, right? Or we already have an online selling agreement. Why do we need the reseller agreement? And so we want an agreement. I'll answer that first part. So we want an agreement rather than just a policy. Typically, now there's kind of a caveat to that, but we want that so that there's buy-in from your approved sellers, but more importantly, we want it so that if you get challenged, right, what Aaron was talking about, pushback from these gray markets, you know, more savvy sellers now, if you get that pushback and you're challenged, let's say you land, an arbitration or a court. Just picture that, right? This is kind of the end goal that we want to make sure we're set on. You want to say, no, look, we connected with our retailers. This was a real policy, a real program that we put in place. There was buy-in, they read it, they signed it. This is a real thing with our authorized retailers. It's not for show, right? We didn't just send out a document and hope it landed in their lap. We take this seriously. Our approved sellers know what our authentic product looks like. And that's why you want, ideally, to have the signed, acknowledged by your retailers, your authorized retailers, as opposed to just a document that goes out that they may or may not read. The lawyer answer, right, kind of gets annoying, but it's true. Every case is different. It depends on the facts. And so when you land in front of a decision maker, a judge, arbitrator, whoever it might be, you want as much security in your position as possible. And if you just said, oh, we blasted it out in an email, they're going to say, oh, wow, that really mattered to you, right? Like, you want to make sure it looks as real as possible when you ever get challenged. And I won't be long-winded on this answer, but it's essential to also have that reseller agreement along with an online selling policy, because if you only have an online selling agreement or policy, you're only capturing or communicating with the best actors, right? Those actors who want to behave, they want to go along with your guidelines. They're going to fill out your application. You're not capturing or communicating with or seeing the rest of your landscape of sellers who are unauthorized, gray market, staying under the radar. So hopefully that makes sense. We want to kind of throw the blanket out broadly with that reseller agreement and then narrow it down for the online selling. So that kind of sets the stage, right, with that foundation. Now we're talking about, okay, when that foundation's in place, how do we monitor effectively, and how do we actually have some enforcement now with teeth that can see results? So there's really 4 keys that at Resale Bloom we focus on for enforcement. The first is visibility, and this is number 1 for a reason, because if you can't see what's going on, if you don't see the problems that are out there, right, then obviously there's no way to address them. And to the right, you'll see that screenshot. That's just a shot of one of the tools that we use. It's called Seller Site. It's a marketplace focused enforcement tool, and we're able to really address almost any marketplace that you can think of, Amazon and Amazon International and all of those. And what we're able to do with this tool is scan for all of the sellers that sell your brand, notify them through the back end of their seller accounts, and basically say, hey, can you verify that you have real product, right? It's a unique tool because we're A, not claiming counterfeit, right? And B, we're not taking the, let's say, legal cease and desist, you're infringing on my trademark type route yet, right? This is more of an easier tool that can go after sellers in bulk and communicate through the back end of the marketplace. And that's why we can see some really large number of results, as you see there with, almost 1,500 unauthorized sellers shut down for this brand, 3,600 listings shut down. And so this is a kind of a nice, and I would say even easy to use tool for some bulk marketplace cleanup of some unsophisticated sellers is how I would describe this. So happy to describe that more, obviously, if we get on a call with any of you guys, but it's a really fun tool that sees really good results on marketplaces. So visibility is key, right? We need to see what's out there. We can do scans, preliminary scans with this tool as well to just see, hey, how many sellers are on your marketplaces in general, right? Like, what's out there right now? Secondly, I would say efficiency is really key. And so whether it's a tool like this or our other tools that I'll get into in a second, but that see the entire internet and are able to enforce that way, we need some way to address, if you have thousands of listings out there, right, across several marketplaces and retail websites, that's way more than I know I could take on, personally monitoring and enforcing. I'm sure it's more than maybe your e-com team can do and monitor. So we need some kind of tool that can automate some of this, that can give us the visibility and the automated enforcement that we can use to efficiently enforce instead of having to manually send out emails, right? And just to kind of go further with that visibility point, that first tool I highlighted, right, was a marketplace focused tool. So you can see here, the other tools we have available lets you see not only the marketplaces on the right there, right, all the marketplaces you're selling on, but also the retailer selling your product. And you can see on that bottom line, over 360 retail websites sell this brand's product. And so if we just look at marketplaces, right, if we're only trying to clean up our marketplaces, we're missing, possibly hundreds of retail websites that are also competing for the price, pushing content and images for your brand. And so we want to make sure we see everything to address the root causes, right? Who's moving first? Who is putting that price up that Amazon's matching? So the marketplace visibility is great, but we want to make sure we see beyond that. And then number 3, key for monitoring and enforcement would be the customization. We want to make sure that it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution, that we, as you see on the left there, some of the settings within our partner tool that we use to enforce, you can see there's a lot of options for are we going to enforce on retailer websites, or you can pick which marketplaces you want to clean up initially, and provide a buffer, right? Maybe for your sellers, if they're within 10 cents, let's let them go. But there's a lot of different ways to set these settings so that you enforce in the way that makes the most sense for your brand. And then finally, permanency. And I think this is right behind maybe visibility in terms of importance, but when we do this enforcement, when we see what's going on and enforce on it, we want to make sure it lasts, right? That it sticks, and these sellers aren't just relisting or coming back in some other marketplace, some other name. And so that's why we lay that foundation initially, and then use tools like these that we have available at Retail Bloom to communicate either through the marketplace, but more importantly, directly with the sellers. We want to communicate to the sellers with an email, phone number, whatever it is, and be direct. And we do have that foundation to say, hey, cease and desist, right? Like, you're not allowed to sell. We have the trademark and you're infringing on it, and here's why. We have this reseller program, and then you actually are, legally taking them down, and they're legally then not allowed to keep selling, right? They're infringing on your trademark, as opposed to just maybe Amazon taking them off on brand registry, or some tool that's going to take them down, but they never understood or got communicated to them that they're infringing on your trademark. So we want that lasting effect of the enforcement as well.
Hey, Andy, before we go into kind of quantifying the opportunity, or, what's the ROI on a program like this, even Aaron had brought it up about, kicking people off through Amazon. I mean, obviously, seller site's been very effective for us just because it works a little bit differently. But can you talk a little bit about brand registry? Because I think that's where that program has changed a bit. We've seen brands start to abuse it, and I think that's part of the reason that it's the brand registry team isn't as responsive as they used to be, because we've heard problems in the past where brands would use brand registry to say, yep, this is an IP, this is counterfeit, and then they're cutting off sellers who end up having legitimate product. So now brand registry isn't as effective for other tools, just because you had bad players kind of abusing the system. Can you talk a little bit about what the purpose of brand registry is as it relates to IP, counterfeit, what you can and can't do through that portal?
Yeah, no, that's a really good call out, and I did want to make sure we touch on that, because I hear from a lot of brands like, well, it's fine, we have, we're submitting listings through brand registry, we expect, to have this cleaned up soon, and there's a lot of, and I don't even think it's brand's fault a lot of the time. It's often kind of Amazon's communication that's not great on this, and there's a lot of confusion around brand registry, what it's good for, what can I expect from it, and I'll try to make it simple for you, really. What brand registry is good for, as far as I've seen, what the brands I've worked with, the experience we have is, if you have a significant counterfeit issue, right? I was gonna just say counterfeit issue in general, like even if it's small, but I'm working with some brands right now that have this one listing that is clearly counterfeit. It's from an overseas seller, not the same product, and they're not getting any response from brand registry. So I would say some sort of significant counterfeit issue, right? These are not our products, they're infringing on it. These are not real, okay? That they will respond to typically. And then secondly, if someone's using your trademark and you sell shoes and they're putting your trademark on, a laptop or something like that, where it's like they're using our trademark and that is not our product, we don't even make that type of product, they'll step in, right? You can obviously prove that, show what your trademark applies to, and they'll address that typically. What it doesn't help, and this is, I think, the focus of this conversation really, is unauthorized sellers. They say in their seller policy, Amazon does, that we all agree to when we sell on Amazon, that it doesn't help brands, or it doesn't help sellers enforce their contractual, I don't know word for word, but their contractual relationships, right, with other businesses basically. And what they're getting at is this reseller program. It's exactly what they're kind of trying to avoid. They're saying, hey, you can do whatever you want. Do what you need to do, brand, by creating your program, setting up relationships through contract with your authorized sellers, and creating that protection. But we as Amazon, as far as we're concerned, first sale doctrine, right? Everyone's allowed to sell. We're not going to go in there and kick off people willy-nilly and take your word for it on your reseller program versus some other brands. And so it's up to the brand to protect against unauthorized sellers. Just because you don't know who a seller is, Amazon's not going to step in and take them down. So
cool. Awesome. Thank you. So flipping to our next topic for today, kind of quantifying the opportunity, like I had said in the intro, a lot of times we get, this is like the least exciting thing to talk about because it's a lot of work and you don't really see the return, and you got a lot of different teams internally, right? You have sales that are looking at something like this and saying, okay, this is going to impact my sales for this month. You have the e-com team fighting back to say, hey, we don't get these guys cleaned up. I'm spending a lot of time on content. And then, then of course, investing in some type of policy or even the software, right? All of that has a cost to it. So we wanted to outline a little bit for you first from a qualitative perspective, and then I'll get into some exercises you can use to actually tie a dollar amount to this. But, what are the costs and what are the benefits from quantitative first? Andy will do that, and then I'll get into kind of the dollar amount. So Andy, back to you on this as I shift through these and hopefully don't make a ton more mistakes as I'm going to the slide.
No problem. Yeah. So, and like Nicole was saying, these are more your qualitative and I'd say objective costs. And what makes it more difficult to put a dollar amount, like let's say on this presentation for each of these, right, is it's different for every brand. So that's why we're not putting a dollar amount for like the cost of service and the software, right? It's going to depend on your brand, the needs that you have, and so these are just some general kind of points, and Nicole will get into how you can view some more dollar amounts or attached dollar amounts to this. So for your costs, there's obviously going to be the software, the service, right, of running that software, doing the enforcement, owning that platform. Next, there's going to be always some time and some effort for your team. Once you even have those policies set, you need to communicate that with your retailers. You need to tell your own team and kind of educate your team on why we're doing this. Here's what the point of this all is, right? There's some time and effort there. And then you'll see a little bit of reduction from in your overall brand sales on the marketplaces typically, right? Because what we're doing is taking a lot of those random sellers down who might account for 30, 40, 60% of your brand sales right now. We're removing them, and not to fear, because one of the benefits, and I think I list this first, is that your approved sellers, though, there'll be some lag, obviously, right, in those buy boxes shifting over and whatnot. But you'll see your approved sellers start to pick up some sales volume, number one. I think the next point is that, yeah, exactly, you're going to regain more pricing and you're going to regain margin. So your approved sellers are going to not only pick up sales volume, but each sale is going to get them more money, right, because their margin's coming back as we stabilize prices. And of course, both of those first 2 points are going to lead to a stronger relationship with your approved sellers. They're going to appreciate it, which actually, if I can just pause everything for a moment, and working with some brands right now, I get this question a lot that, there's pushback because we don't want to ruin relationships with our retailers, or it's really difficult to communicate why we're doing this. But I just want to kind of loudly state that this is actually really good for your approved retailers. You should not fear putting into place a reseller policy, because the right communication with them helps them to understand that actually it's going to protect their margins, it's going to protect pricing on the internet they don't have to fight with. You might be giving them access to some marketing materials and formalizing all the authentic aspects of your product for them, so they can feel stronger about selling your brand. So it's really a great thing for them. Okay, finally, benefits, right? Level the playing field for your retailers, and you're protecting now those sales and your authentic sales on the marketplaces. And then, as Nicole's going to get into right now, we create more of a consistent brand presentation on your listings with your titles, and all of that will stay more cohesive.
Awesome.
And really quick, a question that comes in is, what if the 3P seller is on Amazon is not? What if this 3P seller is on Amazon and it's not a trademark infringement? You're still able to take them down.
The 3P seller is on Amazon and it's not a trademark infringement.
So this gets into the authorized reseller policy, and
okay,
that's my guess, right?
Gotcha. I think I get where it's going. Yeah. So basically, that would be something you wouldn't handle through like, let's say, a legal trademark infringement route. You would actually, because you have that seller as an approved seller currently, it sounds like you would actually go
unapproved seller. So it'd be like a rogue seller that has legitimate inventory.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes. Then yeah, you'd use the trademark. You'd go basically, hey, cease and desist, you're not allowed to sell, you're infringing on our trademark, you'd escalate that language if necessary, right? Send more notices, send more letters. If they don't comply, then this is why we have that foundation that we talked about. We are able to go offline and send, let's get an attorney to send a draft complaint and say, here's the damages you're looking at if we go forward with this. Hopefully they're, they go down at this point. If they don't, like we talked about, you have now the backing to take that as far as you need to, whether it's, court, threat of lawsuit, whatever it works to get them down. So.
Which you wouldn't be able to do without the reseller policy, without the e-com policy.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. Okay, so this is let's say that you don't have any of this in place and you have this buy box problem, and you have some people on your team saying, hey, I got problems with sales. I'm having some inconsistencies, especially on the vendor central side, where 1 month an ASIN will do great, and the next month, it'll be in stock, but all of a sudden the sales drop off. So here would be a manual exercise through Vendor Central, and you can also do this through Seller Central in the business reports, but this is the way that we estimate the cost when you see lost buy box. So lost buy box occurs because of either out of stock, which we're not going to use as the example today. It is caused by third-party sellers dropping price, and then Amazon or another seller not being able to be in that buy box because they're a higher price. Or it's from that suppressed buy box like we talked about earlier, where Walmart has a lower price and Amazon's not going to meet it, so they're just not going to serve you. So in all of those scenarios, we consider that lost buy box. And what we did on this slide is try to give you an example of how you can calculate the loss in sales due to loss in buy box. So within Vendor Central, what you're going to go to is the snapshot or the sales analytics under the Vendor Central Amazon Analytics tab, and you're going to scroll down till you see this lost buy box report. And in this example, you can see on the right for the top ASIN for this period, that ASIN saw about 51% lost buy box, and that was about 40% of the total of the total buy box that happened on the account for that time period. You can see compared to the prior period whether it's going up or down. But let's just say, for an example, this particular set of ASINs in Q1 did about $1.5 million in sales, and they did 10% buy box, lost buy box. So if you just multiply that 1.5 times 10%, you could estimate, round numbers, it's not very specific, right? It assumes a lot of traffic and conversion are consistent, but you could estimate that you're losing out on $150,000 in sales. Even more so if you had 2 time periods that were considered pretty the same things were going on, right? You have controls in Q1 to Q2, so you probably wouldn't want to compare Q1 to Q4 to do this exercise. But let's say that the products are pretty evergreen, they stay in buy box, conversion is consistent, traffic's consistent. Well, you had that $1.5 million in Q1, and then in Q2 you saw 1.2 million with 25% buy box. Well, in that example, you could calculate that we would have picked up another $300,000 if we would have just been in buy box. So this is pretty manual. I wouldn't say again that it's 100% accurate, but if someone from an internal team had said, you were saying, hey, this buy box thing is an issue, and they said, well, I don't get it. What's the cost? What am I losing out? This is a good way to show them in the beginning, if we were to have buy box, this is probably what we would have seen in sales. And if you don't have 1P and you're on the Seller Central side, you would go to the business reports, you would pull in the buy box that gives you what your current buy box is, and then you would take the inverse of that to see what you lost out on. So hopefully that's helpful. Usually we start with this if a brand doesn't have a software, but if they do, this is probably even more impactful. So what we hear a lot of what is in front of you right now is a chart showing the 3P sales in blue, the 1P sales in purple, and then the market share in green. So we're able to do through software, which, Aaron and I actually will be on a call next month to go over this because it's been super insightful for market share. But for purposes of this conversation, we hear a lot, hey, well, if I have buy box loss on Amazon, it doesn't really matter to me. Another third-party seller will just pick up the sale. I don't really care. They're still buying it from me. Yes, I guess, but you can see here that when 1P loses buy box, right, their sales drop down. 3P, yes, of course, picks up a little bit, but they're not going to pick up all of it. And more importantly, the market share goes down. So this happens because when Amazon loses buy box, you lose your ability to advertise. So yes, you're losing a sale to a third-party seller, or they're picking it up, and in the short term you're getting in the sale, but in the long term it's impacting your organic rank because it's impacting your ability to advertise. So this would be a case, and you can see this happen with the arrows at the bottom here, over the time period, that yeah, 3P will pick it up. Of course they will on that day, but going forward, you're losing market share and it costs you more to advertise to get back up in organic ranking. So there's a couple of different, technologies or software out there. This is the one that we use that's been helpful, but it speaks to, yes, we have to invest this time, but if we don't invest in this type of program, if we don't invest in the software or, getting people all on the same page, we're leaving out market share to our competitors who do have it together. So wanted to point that out. The other thing, that would be more of the dollar amount to it. I wanted to get into the impact of brand protection on marketplace efforts. So let's forget. Oh, sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, we're cruising along here. Just have another question that comes in. As we're experienced sellers from Asia offering our products at half off retail, these sellers then own the buy box and collect all the sales for 1 to 3 days, ship confirm orders, but never actually ship products. We've placed orders, submitted cases to brand registry with no resolution since no product was shipped to verify the counterfeit. Each time it's occurred, it's a new seller, their accounts get removed. Any thoughts on, how to address that? It's these people that pop up for 1 to 3 days and steal all the, which it's the same person over and over again, but yeah, it gets taken down. They have another one popping up.
Got it. Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, in general, because even if sellers, and they're difficult, right? If they're located overseas in Asia, wherever they might be, but in general, it's the same, I guess, approach really with those sellers as it would be with US sellers, because they're selling into the US, right? They've placed product on Amazon.com, which is available for sale in the US, so they are now subject to US trademark law, US, guidelines, regulations, everything. So it's the same approach. It's just we need to find out who those sellers are, but you can do the exact same thing of basically take it as far as you need to under trademark law and make them stop, I guess is the best way to put that in a nutshell.
Yep. And then if you don't know who they are because a new seller has always popped up, right? Like they have one Seller Central account, maybe you find who that is, they come down through brand registry, which is an effective way. Like that is a great way to use brand registry. That is the purpose of it. So I know it takes a while, but you're not in any trouble if you submit those. That's what it's for in that scenario. But I would say is, if you can't find the seller, send us the list of the seller name, one of them, and we can look in our database to see if we have their contact information. Because like Andy said, you're going to want to take legal action on this probably. And, if the seller pops up and pops down, going through Seller Central probably isn't as effective as getting a physical address or a phone number or an email address.
Yeah, the last thing, just a comment that comes in is, if you're losing the buy box, right, and you're on either side, vendor, well, I should say probably more on the third party side, affecting your overall allocation on warehouse space, right? If you're losing it and other people are moving more product than you, they'll be allocated more inventory space. Would you agree?
With the FBA restock limits?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if I'm gonna, yes, that does happen. I guess the thing I would say about the third party sellers, let's say that you have 6 approved sellers and one of them all of a sudden breaks MAP, right? Well, they're gonna own all the buy box and their sales are gonna go up significantly. And what's gonna happen to the other third party sellers is they're gonna sit on that inventory and they're gonna come back to you and say, hey guys, I ordered this, I prepped for Q4, my buy box was down 20% and I need an RTV now. So I don't know if that directly answers the question, but yes, when pricing is consistent, when sellers are consistent, it's the best way to get around planning and say, hey, this seller is going to carry this much inventory. This aligns with the FBA restrictions. They have enough inventory to continue to send into Amazon so that they're not sitting on inventory and then impacting their FBA restock limits. So yes, keep sellers consistent, keep pricing consistent. It does make it easier to plan for Q4 and to plan that, each seller is only going to have so much allocation in those warehouses. And when you keep it, like I said, consistent, then it's easier to anticipate which sales from each seller. Aaron, I don't know if there was a question in that, but hopefully that's the way to answer it.
Yeah, I think we covered it. Awesome. Just want to make sure we're addressing these to come in, but yeah, I'll kick it back over to you just to make sure we get to this last part here.
Okay, cool. So we got about 3 minutes. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. So what are the other benefits? I'm talking marketing, e-com teams. When you have a brand protection policy or program in place, what do you see? Consistent brand presentation, right? You have sellers who know their role and what they are supposed to be doing online. So for example, Andy mentioned that, there's some marketing assets that as an authorized seller, they are able to use or more importantly, follow. Well, what I would say in that scenario is that for your authorized sellers, you are creating the content through your own Vendor Central, Seller Central, or whatever it might be, and you're giving them that ASIN list or that Walmart ID list. You have the keys, and then at that point, you don't have all of these other sellers overwriting your content or creating new variations. There's an example that I'm not going to get to because we really are running out of time here, which is great, good problem to have, but we hear a lot about problems about bundling, right? Where sellers out there will create their own variations, their 3-packs, 4-packs, create whatever UPC that they want. This is another way you include that in your reseller agreement to say that that isn't allowed, and it's a way to take action on those people that are creating them. So when you have your brand protection policies in place, you have the keys to the best way of getting control over that consistent brand presentation. And you also have that holistic market share visibility. So in that authorized reseller agreement, hey, great seller, you're authorized, but you need to give us tracings. You need to tell us your ad spend, your ad revenue, your sales on Amazon versus Walmart versus your B2C site. You're able to collect all of that data in one place and then really have an ability to say, okay, what's my sales online for my entire brand, not just this seller? And what do I need to be investing as a whole in every seller or in Walmart or in Amazon to hit my new forecast goal, instead of it just being a little bit more choppy and not understanding who's selling what. And then lastly, we talked about the strategic advertising efforts in the sense of if you lose buy box, you can't advertise. I want to go forward. I had a slide here for advertising that I'm going to skip to. So in this scenario, we get a lot of these questions, right? So why aren't my ads not running? Why aren't my ads running? Why is my cost per click increasing for branded terms? In that scenario, let's say, you're Coke. You want to start bidding on sponsored product ads for Coke, and you see that the cost per click is just going up and up and up, but you don't see competitors on your listings. That's happening because you have other sellers bidding against each other for the exact same term. So within this authorized reseller agreement, you're saying, hey, this is our advertising strategy. In order to be approved, you have to follow it. And it brings that cost per click down. The other, like I said, in the holistic approach, if you had other sellers bidding on certain generic terms, or you're splitting up your portfolio to say, hey, seller, you can sell these products and bid on these terms, you're getting all of that information back, and you're able to say, okay, this type of product line, for example, is doing well. Let's feed that, where maybe this product line isn't as great of a fit for Amazon. Let's discontinue our efforts there or move them around. So understanding who the sellers are, getting those tracings from them, it gives you the visibility to take action. And it's not always bad to know, hey, this ad didn't work, or this type of category is too expensive. If you don't get the data, you don't know how to make decisions. So I did have some other ones. We will have this to send out. I really just want to make sure we're respecting everyone's time. And we talked about a lot of the content advertising. And if you do have any questions on that, would be happy to connect again off the call. But Aaron, I want to pass it back to you. Are there any other questions that we didn't get to today?
No, I mean, there's, I think just because of the closest of time here, we'll wrap it up. But, any other questions, more than happy to connect anybody on the call with Nicole and the team at Retail Bloom afterwards. They're all around great friends, partners. They're experts on Amazon 1P, 3P, actually run their own 3P business. So understand that side intimately, and the importance of it. A lot of people are like, wait a minute, why do they know so much about brand protection? Is they run this for the brands that they buy wholesale and resell, and also the brands they own. So incredibly knowledgeable in this area. Worth a follow-up conversation for sure. If you have additional questions in this area, more than happy to connect you with them after the call. on our side, I'd love to have a conversation with anybody that's on the call. If you have any pain points, any place on Amazon, direct consumer side, drop shipping, international expansion, more than happy to set some time aside on the calendar. Would love to have that conversation with you. Pick your brain as well and just network and knowledge share. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Look for a follow-up email from us, to connect you with the team at Retail Bloom, but also to see if you have time to chat with us on our site as well. Hope everybody has a fantastic Wednesday, a great rest of your week. Everybody take care, stay safe, and look forward to having you at a future event. Thanks again, Andy. Thanks, Nicole. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. All righty. Take care now, everybody.